Good evening. I'm Melissa Tenney, president of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and it is my great pleasure to welcome everyone to the Visiting Artist Program, one of SAIC's oldest public programs, which continues even in our socially distanced time. I am especially grateful tonight to welcome back, virtually at least, Nyugen Smith, an artist I am a great fan of. Nyugen is an alum of the first graduating class of the low residency MFA program, and he is this semester's distinguished alumni lecturer. The Visiting Artist Program established the Distinguished Alumni Lecture Series in partnership with the Office of Alumni Relations in 2006. Since that time, this semi-annual event has featured such talented alums as Emil Ferris, Jeffrey Gibson, Rodney McMillan, Tanya Bruguera, and Sanford Biggers, among others. Tonight, we look forward to hearing from Nyugen about his work, which explores the historical and present-day conditions of Black African descendants in the diaspora across many media, including works on paper, an example of which I feel lucky to have behind me this evening, as well as mixed media drawing, video, sculpture, and writing. After his presentation, Nyugen will answer questions from the audience. To pose a question, please use the Q&A feature. Instructions for using that feature are also being shared by our tech crew via the chat window. And now, to introduce Nyugen, it is my great pleasure to turn it over to Professor in the Department of Art History, Theory and Criticism, and former Dean of Faculty, Lisa Wainwright.
Good evening. Am I on? Am I live? Is this happening? How exciting. Well, not since Robert Rauschenberg has an artist made detritus sing like our distinguished alumnus Nyugen Smith. Truly. Nyugen's ability to weave together found images and objects, myriad materials that hold on to their histories, while he choreographs them into new narratives on post-colonialism, racial justice in the African diaspora, cultural mythologies, and even climate change. It's a big agenda and a worthy one. And he handles it all with great poetic beauty, with a formal tightness, an aesthetic elegance that, again, I have only beheld in Rauschenberg's work, truly. And Nyugen is just as promiscuous. Okay, maybe not quite as promiscuous as Robert Rauschenberg, but he is promiscuous in his use of media, as President Tenney just mentioned. He works across sculpture, video, performance, drawing, painting, photography, installation, and text. Nyugen is insatiable, and this big appetite for formal plays turns his subjects and themes over and over again with nuance of concept and affect continuously unfolding. Nyugen's roots are half Haitian, half Trinidadian, although he was born in Jersey City, New Jersey. He lived in the Caribbean, and this Caribbean heritage drives much of the work. Nyugen earned a BA from Seton Hall University, where he studied political science before discovering art making. And political science would certainly continue to inform the work. He went on to teach high school, 2 years in the New York City public school system, and 8 years at a private college preparatory school in New Jersey. He was a busy and productive high school teacher when I first met him, when I was blown away by the work. And when I learned he did not have an MFA at that moment, it became clear to me that he would greatly benefit from the school's newly developed low-res MFA structure. And as President Tenney noted, he joined us and we were delighted. He benefited from the school's program, allowing him to study in the summer between teaching, hooking up, of course, with the great Greg Bordowitz and his amazing staff. And Nyugen graduated, as Alyssa said, in the first class, and we were very proud. And then he became a rock star. He earned the prestigious prize, the Leonore Annenberg Fellowship for the Performing and Visual Arts, and he went on to receive a Franklin Furnace Award, a Joan Mitchell Grant, the Dr. Doris Derby Award, and other prestigious accolades. Nyugen has shown his work around the world, from Norway to Haiti, from the Boston Center for the Arts, where Magdalena Moskalevich, our faculty in arts administration, curated him into a 2019 exhibition, to Prism and Scope art fairs in Miami. He has performed at the Kitchen in New York, at the International Festival of Performance Art in Fort-de-France, Martinique, as well as at the White House under Obama, of course, with our other fabulous alum, Cheryl Pope. And last year, Nyugen showcased major works at the Pérez Museum in Miami. His forthcoming exhibitions include a show at the Nasher Sculpture Center in Dallas and at the El Museo del Barrio in New York as part of their triennial. And while making all of this art and doing all of these exhibitions, he holds an interdisciplinary position as faculty at the Meadows School of the Arts at Southern Methodist University in Texas. Nyugen Smith's capacious assemblage aesthetic wonderfully captures our moment of diversity and inclusion. His cultured jamming, his mashups, his fulsome transcultural objects speaks to the complexity of our current state of affairs as we wrestle with a renewed racial consciousness and an understanding of the world as a place of intersectional identities. And Nyugen is optimistic about all of it, about growing into a new society, one that honors many traditions and many beliefs. He raises challenging issues with his bricolage practice, a skill of making do with what you have that emerges in disenfranchised communities. But this tradition in Nyugen's hands is also an act of ennobilizing the everyday, of creating secular rituals, of making detritus sing. It is with great pleasure that I introduce you now to Nyugen Smith.
Thank you, Lisa, for such a wonderful, warm introduction. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much to Andrea Piero, to Ashley Spell and Anja Jekka for all your hard work in putting all of this together. And thank you to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for this opportunity to share with the wider SAIC community. And yeah, just to be back with everyone in this capacity again. And before I go any further, I want to make sure that I give honor to the ancestors who we would want to be with us in this space and time. Give thanks for their presence, and thanks for opening the doors. Thank you to all my friends, family, and everyone who's taken a moment out of your lives to be with here this evening. So, Ashe. I thought that it would be fitting to begin with this image. Considering the occasion, this is from my thesis presentation, the last presentation of my MFA studies at SAIC. So I start here to pay homage to Greg Bordowitz, the director of the low residency MFA program, all of the faculty and visiting artists who had a significant impact on my development as an artist, and my cohort who also taught me so much, and I'm grateful for the friendships that I've made through the program. I also start here because this scene, the microphones, the handmade microphones, the handmade low-res News 16 sign on the handmade desk, the chalkboard with the dials, the knobs that click when you change the channel. All of this is part of the imagery from my childhood growing up in Trinidad. And we sat in front of the television from time I came home from school, did homework, and then was able to sit down and watch a few after school specials, which were all broadcasted from the US. sat in front of this large box that we call television. When the picture became unclear, you went behind it, gave it a slap. You had to stand up to change the channel, turn the knobs. And we only had 2 channels, channel 2 and channel 13, and they showed the same thing. And they signed off at, I think it was like 9 o'clock at night, something like that. No more TV till the next morning. This was the place that formed me, the place that was incredibly important in my formative years in thinking about the way that I am now moving through the world. Ashe. This is the living room, our family living room in Trinidad, the space where all of this happened, watching the television, the learning different things about responsibilities like cleaning. Every Saturday, we clean this place from top to bottom. This photograph was taken during my last trip to Trinidad in 2017. And this was part of the Leonore Annenberg fellowship. What I proposed is that I would travel throughout the Caribbean doing research to inform my practice. And Trinidad was the stop to where I was to research Carnival, the history of Carnival, also the spiritual traditions that's embedded in Carnival in Trinidad. And this photograph I took here in the living room as a way to kind of mark the importance of my return to Trinidad for this very specific reason. And art is what actually has made this all possible, to kind of reimagine, to think about my upbringing here and how it has impacted me as a person, also as an artist. So it's like a dramatic scene. The curtains are there. We're seeing the light coming through, and can almost hear the start of the program, if you will. Ashe. This is a Trinidad popular house, the case study, right? The drawings. This was part of the research that I was doing while I was there, was going to the Ryerson Library over at the Art Institute to go into the architecture archives. And I wanted to really look up the architecture, particularly architecture from the colonial period in Trinidad. And I came across this drawing in the book, The Caribbean Style. And one of the things that really jumped out at me first was my interest in the fences that I see throughout the Caribbean, and this fences with the X. And so for me, this has become a symbol of colonialism, this kind of X within a box. And that struck me, so it had my attention right away when I saw it in the book. But then I thought about all of the different many different possibilities of being able to incorporate this image in the work that I'm doing. So collected it into a file and continue to do the research. Ashe. So in 2017, it should be 17, this was the first opportunity I had to work with that image. And this was for an exhibition that I did at Hudson County Community College here in Jersey City. And when I was invited to be a part of this show called Housing Works, really thinking about housing and what the idea of home, I started to just ask a lot of questions about the college, about the student body, et cetera. And I came to find out that Hudson County Community College, the majority of the students that are there are first generation college students, the first in their families to go to college, as well as it is primarily those who are born to immigrant parents. And I found that to be really fascinating also in relationship to the fact that Jersey City itself, my hometown, is considered the most diverse city within the United States. And when I saw the windows here in the gallery, I can see part of Jersey City, but also I can see Manhattan. And I thought that this would be a great place to think about this idea of where we come from, and then making it personal in the sense of where I come from. So born in Jersey City, here I am looking out at the city where I was born, but also seeing New York in the background and connecting that back to the place that was so fundamental in my development, which is Trinidad. And thinking about that as part of the idea of this experience or immigrant experience of coming from one place, holding certain things from that place as you move through, whether you move to a different city, a different country, etc. But this idea of always having the foundation, the place from which you come in you, and looking through and operating through, vibrating through that from that particular place. And also too, in thinking about New York as the pinnacle, in a sense, where like being in Trinidad growing up, it's like, and even to now, this idea of the United States, and maybe not in this particular moment in time, but for sure, when I was still living there and growing up, the US was always the place to aspire. And it wasn't just the US, but New York was the thing to aspire. So I saw this opportunity through the windows as a way to think through all of that and to present those ideas in such a way. Ashe. Here's the floor plan of that case study house. So I wanted to create the drawing on the floor of the actual floor plan of a typical house. And I thought about the idea of the ground, the idea of tracing, the idea of remembering movements through a space. And so one of the first things that I came to was thinking about the table, and the table, kitchen table to be more specific, and thinking about the kitchen table as that place that where people commune, where different types of activities happen. And the flower pattern that you're seeing there that form the lines of this floor plan actually are in line with what would be very visually like a visual representation of many of the tablecloths that I grew up seeing, the plastic tablecloths with fruit and flowers and that kind of thing on there. So I wanted to bring back this pattern, this material, this aesthetic to tie back into those who have had this experience to be able to identify with such, and putting that in soil. The soil is soil that I sourced here in the US. So in thinking about the idea of like this particular land meeting the land where I grew up, the land of my ancestors past, and fusing that into this work, as well as to bring a little different, and as well as to bring color into this particular part of the work, right? Because it's the vinyl that exists on the windows and this part that exists on the floor, I consider them one work. Ashe. And as we talk about traces, as I talk about memories connected to the past and connected to my cultural past, I think about the part of my heritage that I really am a bit disconnected from, in the sense of in relation to my Haitian ancestry. So I've never been to Haiti. I've only spent time in Trinidad. And so during my time as a MFA student at SAIC, I wrote a poem about my disconnection to my Haitian ancestry. And within this poem, what I started to do was, after I wrote the poem, I started to write it out, because I wanted to see the poem. I wanted to hold the poem. So I took these strips of rubber and I hand carved the letters so I can read the poem in vertical strips. And thinking about different ways to then use this mass And this, what you're seeing here, this mass of text that's inside of this bowl is just a small portion of the poem. It's probably a quarter of it. So this is what, after time, this is where it ends up. I'm constantly rethinking work. I'm constantly recontextualizing work. So this particular work as it exists right now may not necessarily exist like this a year from now. But at this moment, I feel really, really good about the way that this is presented. The rubber poem piled up like jarble, like a language I don't understand, like confusion, like a lot of information, like abundance of sustenance overflowing this bowl, this in what we would call an enamel bowl, this bowl, this object that's very familiar to those in the diaspora. On top of grass, thinking about nature, thinking about the lushness of the Caribbean, of the different places throughout the Caribbean basin, but also it's plastic. Thinking about the bringing in of the influx of plastics in our everyday lives. Thinking about moving outside of the indigenous forms of technology and moving into the synthetic, the manufactured. Ashe. And from the rubber text that I created for the poem, came these negative spaces. So as I would cut out a letter, these little, the darkest parts, the darkest images that you see on each one of these works, these rubber bits, and those were the negative spaces. And I started to look at those as some sort of language. And I realized that the connection between this new language I'm looking at in the form of these rubber pieces, these cutaways, these negative spaces, looking at these as a foreign language, but thinking about Haitian Creole as a foreign language to me because I don't speak it. I understand practically none of it. So they went hand in hand for me. So it became about like thinking about how do I use these negative spaces to now speak about and think through the idea of learning, relearning, filling in the gaps of what is lost and what is missed, forming new ways of communicating with what's available. So I started this whole series called Master My Language as a way to think about mastering what is one's own in terms of language, but also in relationship to the idea of colonialism and how language was forced upon those who were enslaved and colonized. And still this kind of colonization through language is still happening today. Ashe. For each one of those pieces, you saw the earphones that was below two of those, and those provided what I've been doing now is developing a musical notation system for these forms, and those two were the first ones that have been scored so far. So as you see here, just a closer view of two of the pieces, you see the graphite that's there. So I'm essentially redrawing, tracing, copying in the way that one would do when you're learning a new language as a child. You would copy it, or as an adult too. You're kind of rewriting the text that's printed in the book as a way to learn the shapes of each part of the language, the smudges that's there in connection to erasure, in connection to trying to get something right, as well as for the thinking about an aesthetic element to this work as well. And the one to the right, seeing the yellow that's there, kind of bringing in the language of learning and the tools of learning, such as a highlighter. The white that you see down below, thinking about erasure, thinking about the whiteout, right? So bringing in these actions that are, these colors that are specifically related to actions in association with learning. Ashe. And as we think about language, as I think about language, one of the things that that has stayed with me from the first time that I went to Martinique was having conversation with a few of the other artists, and they were talking about Frantz Fanon. And at that time, during my first trip to Martinique, I had only just heard the name before, but didn't know anything about Frantz Fanon. And so I started to do some research after I got back home after that trip. And one of the quotes that was in an introduction to his book, Wretched of the Earth, the text said something to the effect of, they, meaning the colonizers, fill our mouths with such high-sounding gluttonous words that they stick to our teeth. And that, all of us, when I read that, it was like the imagery of language being inscribed within a mouth, on teeth, was something that stayed with me, and I knew that I would come back to work with it at some point. So the first iteration of this work essentially were just about 4 or 5 of these teeth. And they're the ones that you see like in the upper right, where you see number 19. If you come down to the front center, you see the gold T, that's like the New York Times T. That's when I first started thinking about this idea of putting text on the teeth in relationship to that quote, and started to think about it a little bit deeper. The following summer I was there, and as I started to make these works, thinking about the kind of the ugliness of colonialism, the ugliness of slavery, the remnants of all of that, and the legacy of that. Thinking about sugar cane, and the relationship between rotting and sugar cane. So I wanted to have these deterioration that's happening, rotting is happening within the teeth themselves. Also thinking about health and the impacts of these circumstances on the Black bodies. And so all of these started to kind of come together for me, and then thinking about the sites of mass graves where the enslaved would be buried. And I was imagining an excavation, I was imagining a finding, and then thinking about the process of identifying, so the connection between teeth and identity, the teeth and identifying after some sort of tragic accident where the rest of the remains are unidentifiable. And so this piece called Trauma on Site is still evolving for me too. I have these black and white tiles here in connection to, in thinking about spaces where laws are made, these grand buildings, spaces where many of these traditions are upheld that were placed upon and forced upon the enslaved and the colonized, such as religion, thinking about cathedrals and their elaborate floors. So my checkerboard floor is a signifier to those kind of architectural elements. Ashe. And as I start to do more research in going back and finding out some of the root causes of the conflicts that are happening around the world, it traces back to the legacy of slavery, the legacy of colonialism, dividing spaces, and extracting resources from specific locations. And in 2005, I met a photographer. Her name is Shanoa Maxwell, and she had just come back from an excursion to Uganda, and she was talking about sharing images with me about her excursion and the work that she was doing there. And some of the images, I saw these constructions, these shelters, forms of shelter that people who were in refugee camps or just outside of refugee camps had built. And when I saw them, first of all, they resonated as sculpture in the way that they were constructed. And then the second thing that came to mind was, it reminded me of many of the vernacular architecture, forms of vernacular architecture I had grown up seeing. And the next thing it did for me was it started to give me the opportunity to use the way that I had already been working with found materials to really speak about and share my interest in the suffering of those who are still living and existing in the spaces where extraction is happening, where colonialism still has a heavy hand, and the people are still in this phase and stages of redeveloping and stages of bringing together the remains, bringing together the parts that they can access in order to survive, make a living, and thrive. And that started my series called Bundle House. And Bundle House, for me, literally, it means bundling materials to make a house, make a home. And metaphorically, it speaks to those who are forced to rebuild their lives from things that remain, whether it's after some sort of traumatic event, specifically, and thinking about natural disasters, man-made disasters, war, famine, people who have to flee because of those circumstances and many other circumstances and have to rebuild. So this is what Bundle House is about, and this is my very first Bundle House sculptural installation. And this was created in a space in Jersey City. Ashe. In 2008, I was invited to be part of an exhibition at the Jersey City Museum. I can't wait till we bring back a museum to Jersey City. But this was my thinking of when I had the opportunity, when I received the invitation to be in this exhibition. I wanted to definitely bring Bundle House into the museum space. I felt like it was a strong body of work. The curator, Rocio Aranda Alvarado, at that time at the Jersey City Museum, she was really interested in Bundle House work. So we had this long conversation about some of the ideas that I would have to present there. And I just kept thinking about the fact that not only are these traumatic events happening in this very specific spaces throughout the continent of Africa is what I was looking at that moment, but I also thought about how it exists around the world and in different forms, but it exists around the world. And the fact that we all will be continuing to experience the devastation and the effects of climate change. And so I thought about this idea of how do I represent and think about the world within the Bundle House context. And the first thing that came to me was soon come, in terms of Bundle House will soon come to and touch every part of the world. So I thought of this world map and started to approach it from that particular stance. And what I did was here, the constructions are actually built on top of a world political map on top of wood. So finding a world political map, one of the problematics about this map is the fact that we're looking at Africa, the scale of Africa within this map, and Africa within this map is incredibly small. And that's to kind of talk to, and it didn't dawn on me at that moment. Someone actually pointed out to me after I made it, in thinking about the world political map and how maps are drawn for specific purposes. Ashe. This is a detail, South America. Ashe. Detail of Asia. And going into maps, this was a work that I did for the exhibition called Relational Undercurrents of the Caribbean Archipelago, which started at the Museum of Latin American Art that was curated by Tatiana Flores. And this was thinking about the way that people speak about the Caribbean as a monolithic thing. Some people don't make the distinctions or acknowledge the nuances between different countries within the Caribbean, such as language, different customs, traditions. And so what I did was I took 5 different Caribbean islands, I overlaid them, and I rotated until I found a shape formed by all of the overlapping islands that I placed there. And this was the shape of the new island called Isle de Triba Martica. And Triba Martica is a portmanteau of the 5 different islands that I brought together: Trinidad, Barbados, Martinique, Haiti, and Jamaica. Ashe. Here's a detail to show you, so you're able to see how the close-up of the work. So all of these lines that you see formed here that look like a railroad, it's hand sewing. So these are borders. So this is from the border. This work is all from the Borderline series, the Bundle House Borderlines. And what I do here, the part of the process is populating each section of paper with bundle houses and then bringing them all together and find where they fit. So it's like playing puzzle. And then sometimes there might be a hole that exists, as in this image here, that I have to actually fill intentionally. So once they come together, then I glue them together and then hand stitch them. All right, can we back up to the image right before this, please? So this is a macro view to see the entire thing. And then Ashe, we get closer to see the detail in every one of those bundle houses that populate the entire landscape, as well as the stitching that goes throughout the entire work. All of the brown that you see there in the ground, I've been collecting soil from my travels, and this soil, I'm actually using the soil on the maps as color, bringing in the diaspora literally to the works of art. Ashe. Bundle House number 6, Bundle House Borderlines number 6, Imembe. And this is actually the island of Haiti, which was its original name, otherwise known as Hispaniola, but it's rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise. When I began this work, I was invited, this is for an exhibition, thinking about the relationship between the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And when I printed out the map of Haiti, I left the studio, I came back in, and it was in this orientation. And when I saw it this way, it resonated as a figure. And so I thought, okay, this will be, this is how I'm going to approach this work. And it became clear to me that this needed, I was thinking more about the tensions in the relationship between Haiti and Dominican Republic. And for me, this became a loa. The figure became a loa, or a deity for the unification and the repairing of the historical damage between, and historical tension between the two islands. I mean, the two countries within the island. Ashe. Here's the detail, bringing you into to see specifically the snake. The snake is hand sewn sequins, and I have brought that into the work in paying homage to the Haitian craft of creating voodoo flags. And the voodoo flags are usually predominantly made of sequins, and the sequins are reflecting this light. So this object, let's call it that for a brief moment, the object or the flag essentially has its own light. It gives its own light. And that was something I've been interested in after I started to do a little bit more research into the flags and the way that they're made and some of the symbolism within it. And so I brought in this as a homage to that particular craft and tradition that I am also a part of through my lineage. Ashe. There's a detail, insight. Ashe. And begins work on paper with singular bundle houses, which take up the majority of the composition of the work. And I wanted to really be able to work with the materials in this way of really bundling something to essentially be more of a low relief. Ashe. 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 And here begins the series of mini bundle house minis, where I'm taking the idea of the large sculpture and bringing it down to a smaller size, thinking about scale, thinking about the opportunity to be able to literally step around it in the process of making, but just to give some variation in terms of the way that I'm thinking about bundle house through works on paper, through large scale sculptural installation, but also in smaller sculptures. Ashe. Skipped one. Yes. FS Mini number 2. Found materials, handcrafted wood. Ashe. An outdoor installation, which was at the Pérez Museum, which was also the grounds for my collaborative performance with the artist Marvin Fabian. Ashe. Detail of that piece. Ashe. Newark, scrolls. Ashe. Bringing in the performative, connecting past with present. Carnival, masquerade, religion. Ashe. Spirit, spirit saddle. Being ridden by the spirit, spirit possession. Ashe. Behold your horse, a new performance to come. Working with the choreographer Christiane Emmanuel in Martinique to help me develop the vocabulary of movement for this performance. Ashe. And beginning the ideas of bringing two-dimensional works to the live space and through this performance after the fracture in collaboration with Marvin Fabian. Ashe. Telling the story of the fracture, the island, the space where we as people in the Caribbean are now unified. New folklore, new traditions, new song. Ashe. Marvin creating the soundscape inspired by bouillon music and reggae dancehall music, but fusing with electronic and techno. Ashe. It was a moment of thinking about the future, thinking about the fracture, thinking about the history of the Caribbean, the parts that have brought us to this reckoning, this place of reckoning, especially as it relates to climate change, the division of water and bureaucracy that separates us. But now through the fracture, we have been unified. So this joy, this celebration, this embracing of each other, the embracing of each other's cultures. Ashe. Imaginary spaces, the shared imaginary spaces, worlds of wonders and mystery. Ashe. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience to bring together other performers from Miami in the making of this work. Ashe. The flag that we raised on the island was actually an offering, a basket full of fruit, vegetables, water that we shared with the audience, the witnesses who were present, and then raised this to the sky to offer it as a way of thinking of us moving forward, the possibility of a prayer, the possibility of a meditation. Ashe. Ashe. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyugen. Terrific.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see. So I'm going to pull up some questions here.
Yeah.
From the audience, and One question that came up that was actually a question I had too, is can you maybe tell us about how your work is received in the Caribbean versus how it's received in the US? Is it, are there differences? Is it something that you consider?
Yeah, absolutely. Always have to consider that. I feel like one of the things that I was really concerned about, I should actually say insecure about, when I first really started to make work and thinking about the Caribbean, was the fact that I felt like a sense of like being removed and a distance between there and here, and myself and that space. And so through engagement with many other artists throughout the Caribbean, I was always asking questions about, you know, the way that the work is reading or being read, how is the work being received from their point of view, and the responses that were always encouraging, in the sense of feeling as though it was the work taps into speaking about the ideas, conversations, issues that exist within the space, but coming from looking at it from another point of view that's actually outside, right? So sometimes they say in order to really see it better, you have to kind of step outside or see things in it from a different point of view. You have to step outside of it. And so this has been the conversation and what I've been hearing about that. And then the fact too is that I go there to work. I go there to make work. I go there to collaborate. So that's also a really important thing for me, particularly in my practice, is to, if I'm going to be making work about another space, being there in the space is essential.
There's another question from your audience about scale. Somebody wants to know if you can elaborate more on your use of scale. For example, are the bundle house sizes determined by the things you collect and how they fit together?
Good question. The scale of the installations that I make are usually the indoor installations, definitely the architecture of the space determines what the scale of the bundle house. So I am actively, when I'm making those, I bring a certain amount of materials with me to the location, but I also scour the area for other detritus, other things that people have discarded, and bring those into the space to make the work, because that's also telling about the immediate environment and its relationship to detritus and its relationship to the function of objects and such. So I'm bringing, that way of working helps to determine the scale of the installations themselves. And the smaller ones, I'm thinking a lot about how do I think about this act of construction on a level that's way bigger than me, and an act of construction that's much smaller, right? Having to be more nimble in order to create something that sometimes is trying to get at something a lot larger, right? So all of these different ways of thinking about the issues, the ideas that's embedded in the work, but thinking about that through the act of creation.
Cool. We're jumping all over the map here, but they're all good questions. Someone wants to know if you can talk more about how your relationship to language has changed. Maybe what they mean is, as you've used it from the 2D drawing work or the sculptural material into performance. Have you been doing performance the entire time that you've been doing the 2D and 3D work?
No, I started performance around 2013. Yes.
Okay.
So in terms of language, language itself has always been as an art form. Language, as in thinking about the use of language and construction of language, has been with me since a kid. Writing songs and performing, like just pretending I'm playing the guitar and literally making up songs on the spot. Coming from that legacy of calypso music in Trinidad, the impromptu, where people extempo, where they're making up the lyrics on the spot, freestyling. So all of that is something that I grew up with, and really Trinidadians have a way of using language with the subtleties, with the kind of slick remarks and the sense of humor and different things like that. So I think I became very aware of that once I came to the US, those differences and the kind of nuances of language. And so as an artist, I go back to it constantly. It's even if I'm thinking about one of the bundle house borderlines map, I'm thinking about, especially if I know I'm going to include text on it, I think about the language. How am I going to, what words am I going to use? And also, how are the words going to be presented in there, right? So a different kind of flourish of a letter that's included in the text on one of those maps, as an example, speaks to a certain kind of legacy of language. So there's just different ways that I think about language and how it's evolving for me.
Cool. Here's a great question. Here, listen to this. Your work seems to always maintain the perfect balance between playful, joyous beauty and the dark pain of history. Could you talk more about how you think about these contrasting elements and how this plays a role in your process?
Mm-hmm. One is, I consider myself an optimist. And I think through that, the optimism then I think affords and naturally brings out a sense of playfulness within the world of doom and gloom. So the way that I use language sometimes within textual pieces to be in that liminal space of being, yeah, that's funny, but no, it's not really funny. Thinking about the hardcore issues that's embedded in Bundle House, and at the same time thinking about the like material memory and how material memory can be used to bring people close to something that is not beautiful, something that is not desirable in terms of the circumstances that bring about Bundle House. So I'm thinking about like these ideas of like the sculpture, for instance. I'm really interested in the squishy. So like these kind of pillow-like segments that you'll find around the bundle houses, like that relationship to play, to comfort, to toys. All of these like visual languages have been, collecting in my head and are synthesized through and within the creation process.
That relates to the next question from our audience. Nyugen, what is your process of acquiring your found objects? Do you intentionally search for particular objects, or are you inspired by the objects you find and incorporate them into your work from there?
Mm-hmm. So that has changed over time, because there was one moment where I was just going out where my old studio used to be in Jersey City. We're in an old factory building. And in that neighborhood, there were all these factories before they came in and started redeveloping everything. So we literally used to grab duffel bags. My studio mates and I grabbed duffel bags and go on recon missions collecting stuff. And I'm still using materials that I collected since 2005. So then after that time, there was this moment where there was like a wave of bed bugs that came across the whole like East Coast, like New York area. So I just stopped picking up anything from outside in the street because didn't want to bring any of that home. So I stayed and worked with things that I was like literally finding that I had in my studio. But now it's when I say find now, that word, the definition of find has also changed, because there are times where I may go into an antique shop and search to see what comes to me, but thinking through the lens of my work constantly. So I may see something, I'm going to get that. But that thing is, I'm picking it up because it also has a sense of history. It has evidence of touch, evidence of having gone through some things. So this is, these are kind of like the history of the way that I've been collecting materials and working with materials. And also too, I consider sometimes when I say found materials, it's that I'm working on pieces and I may construct something and then that gets cut out of the work and thrown to the side. And then a year later, I'm in my studio and I find this kind of mixture of materials together. And in one section, it's like the perfect thing that I need for another area. So in a way, I'm thinking about that as found, right? So it's different kind of definitions of found, but this to share a little bit about process and how I encounter and select materials and objects.
So it makes me wonder if when you use the term found object or objet trouvé, which is a surrealist strategy, of course, what is your relationship to the history of modern art?
Well, I mean, that's the broad question.
Well,
it is.
Want me to refine it more? I mean, I think that that's just interesting. You studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. My guess is you use the museum a lot. Does the history of modernism play a role in your work?
I wouldn't necessarily say the history of it, but I'm inspired by, I learn from all types of movements of art. So if we think about modernism and their use of found materials and things like that, yes, that's definitely there. And I would also say even deeper than that, thinking about the history of using found materials throughout the Black diaspora, like in terms of like creation of fetish objects, like those were created from using materials that were found as well as the hand constructed. So I'm combining all of that, and it's important for me to also especially look back at that particular, my Africanness, my Blackness, the history of the way that we've used materials in the way that I think about materials, because it's not about just about the object, but about the energy that the object also holds and transmits. So it's important for me to be connected to that legacy in order to hopefully have my work also have that ashe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because that's something that like David Hammonds talks about too. And he gets blown away when he goes to the Field Museum here in Chicago and seeing the use of certain kinds of materials. But then at the same time, he's just totally Duchampian, he digs Duchamp. So it's this interesting melange of modernism and his African sources, which we know is a part of the tradition. Somebody's asking about your teaching, and is teaching something that informs or impacts your work? Has it had any impact on your making?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the exchange with students is always it helps me to to really clarify my thoughts in the way I need to express something, to ask a very pointed question. It forces me to synthesize a whole lot of information to be able to engage in a dialogue with those who are still trying to find their way through all of this. It also, a lot of times the ideas that the students come up with are incredibly amazing and brilliant. There are times where they're stuck with something or they're trying to work through things. So my research, in order to help them, that adds to my vocabulary. It adds to my understanding of things that I may not have necessarily had an understanding or a different level of understanding. So there's always this exchange, and I was telling someone the other day that coming out of once school began and we're still in this pandemic, being in class in exchange with my students was really, really helpful for me to come out of my own head, my own studio, my own life, and kind of engage. That was so important. And I think that's indicative of my experience of teaching.
So Nyugen, it seems we have time for one last question. And I'm going to use this one, which is provocative and good. What advice do you have for artists who have not yet found their voice?
Who have not yet found their voice. Keep looking. But really, when I say keep looking, stay close to the things that interest you, and dive deeper into the things that interest you. And I think that when you dive deeper into the things that interest you and challenge you, you find ways to reimagine. You find ways to go deeper into the questions related to that specific topic. And ultimately, then, I feel like the work starts to have some sort of association with that, whether it's diving deeper in it through the work or running away from it through the work, but I say dive deeper into the things that really interest you, and stay close to the things that you love, and stay true to yourself. Don't follow what you think the trend is and this and that, because trends fade.
Well, thank you, Nyugen. Wonderful to see you. Wonderful to look at the work and hear your thoughts. And thank you for being a distinguished alum.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for joining today, and everyone on the whole team that made this possible. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Okay.